Welcome to the channel, where powerful stories come to life. If this one moved you, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. We love seeing how far our stories travel. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell because tomorrow, we've got another unforgettable story you won't want to miss. A teen walked into a jewelry store with cash. What the clerk did next sparked outrage. 16-year-old Miles Anderson had been counting down the days to his little sister's birthday for months. In the quiet town of Willow Creek, birthdays weren't just a celebration. They were a symbol of love, of resilience, of family holding each other up when the world felt too heavy. His sister Maya was turning 12 this weekend, and he wanted to give her something unforgettable. Not just a card or a cake, but a gift that would stay with her for years. Something she could wear, touch, and remember that her big brother believed she was worth more than the world told her. For weeks, Miles had been working extra hours after school at a local coffee shop. Every afternoon, he'd slip on his apron, wipe down counters, steam milk, and hustle through orders just to earn a few more dollars. He skipped outings with friends, passed up new sneakers, and tucked every tip carefully into a jar on his dresser. That jar became his secret mission. A quiet promise to a little girl who looked up to him more than she ever said out loud. Maya had always adored charm bracelets. She loved the way each tiny symbol told a story. A star for her dreams, a book for her love of reading, a heart for the family that stood by her through every storm. Miles had seen the perfect one months ago. A sterling silver bracelet with 5 delicate charms nestled in a velvet case at Belmont Fine Jewelry, the most upscale store in town. It was simple, elegant, and strong, just like Maya. He had passed by the store window dozens of times on his walk home, pressing his hand lightly against the glass, imagining the way her eyes would light up when she opened the box. The bracelet cost $175, more than he had ever spent on anything in his life. But he didn't flinch. Every refill, every sore back after a late shift, every early morning where he dragged himself to school with aching feet, it was all worth it. Because this wasn't just a gift. It was a message. A way of telling his sister you matter more than you know. On that warm Saturday morning, with a clear blue sky above and the sound of birds in the trees, Miles tucked the cash into his wallet, zipped up his hoodie, and stepped onto the sidewalk with purpose. He checked the time, 10:03 a.m., and smiled to himself. This was it. He had the money. He knew the bracelet was still there, and nothing, not the whispers of doubt in his head or the fear of being judged for how he looked, was going to stop him. From doing this, today was for Maya. Today he was going to show her just how loved she truly was. Miles reached the corner of Willow Creek's historic downtown, his eyes landing on the glimmering glass storefront of Belmont Fine Jewelry. He paused for just a second, his reflection staring back at him from the spotless display window. His hoodie was unzipped, revealing the neatly pressed polo shirt he had ironed the night before. He looked clean, respectful, even a little nervous, but still, something about the way he adjusted the hood around his shoulders told you he wasn't just fixing his clothes. He was preparing himself. For what, he couldn't say. But he'd felt this quiet tension before. That low hum in the chest when you walk into places where people don't expect you to belong. With a steady breath, he pulled the door open. The faint chime above the entrance rang out like a warning bell. Too soft for anyone else to notice, but loud enough for him to feel. Inside, the air was thick with luxury. Bright lights shimmered off glass cases lined with gold, diamonds, and polished silver. The scent of expensive cologne mixed with the glossy finish of mahogany floors. An older couple browsed rings at the far end of the room, while a woman in pearls examined earrings under a magnifying glass. And behind the counter stood a woman with perfect posture, bleached blonde hair swept into a bun, and eyes as sharp as broken glass. Linda Carver. She glanced up the moment Miles stepped in. Her smile flickered, polite at first, but then it vanished. Her eyes narrowed, tracing every inch of him like a scanner searching for flaws. Miles felt it immediately. That shift. The silent suspicion. The way her hand subtly moved closer to the store phone. He offered a polite smile, nodding toward the bracelet he'd been eyeing for weeks. "Hi," he said, voice clear. "I'd like to see that charm bracelet in the front case, please." Linda didn't move. Instead, she crossed her arms, tilting her head like she didn't quite hear him. Or maybe like she didn't believe he had the right to ask. "You sure about that one?" she asked, the condescension in her voice hidden behind a shallow smirk. "It's not exactly cheap." Miles blinked. He could feel the heat rising in his chest, but he stayed calm. His mother had taught him that. Always speak clearly. Always stay respectful. He pulled out his wallet, unfolded the crisp stack of $20s he had saved and placed it on the counter. "I've got the money," he said. "I've been saving up." Linda's eyes scanned the cash like it was stolen goods. She didn't reach for the bracelet. Instead, she scoffed. Barely. Loud enough to hear, but heavy enough to sting. "And where'd you get that kind of cash, sweetheart? Find it on the sidewalk?" The words hit like a slap. Miles stood there, heart pounding, staring at a bracelet meant to show his sister she mattered. But in Linda's eyes, all she could see was a suspect. He hadn't even touched the bracelet. Yet, and already he was guilty. Miles took a breath, willing himself to stay composed. He had done nothing wrong. Nothing. He wasn't going to let Linda Carver's suspicion ruin this moment. Not after everything he'd worked for. With a nod, he gestured again to the display. "May I see the bracelet, please?" Linda didn't say a word. She just stared for a moment longer, like she was waiting for him to slip up. Finally, with a dramatic sigh, she turned to unlock the case. Her movements were slow, deliberate, like she wanted to make sure everyone in the store saw exactly what she was doing. She pulled the bracelet out, placing it on a velvet tray in front of him, and gave a warning in a tone sharp enough to draw attention. "Be careful with it," she said coldly. "It probably costs more than you make in a month." Miles clenched. His jaw but said nothing. He reached out gently, his fingertips brushing against the cool silver. It was perfect. Just like he imagined. Maya was going to love it. He turned the bracelet slightly, admiring how the charms caught the light. And then it happened. The bracelet slipped from his fingers. It hit the counter with a soft clink before bouncing off the edge and falling to the tiled floor below. It was nothing, just a small accident. But Linda reacted like a gun had gone off. "Oh my God," she shrieked, her voice slicing through the quiet store like glass. "I knew it." Heads turned. The woman with the pearl earrings froze mid-sentence. The older couple stepped back from their display case. Miles's eyes widened. "What?" "No, wait," he said, bending slightly, reaching for the bracelet. But Linda was already reaching for the phone. "Don't move," she snapped. "You were trying to pocket it, weren't you? Thought I wouldn't notice?" Miles straightened up, heart pounding. "That's not true, I dropped it. You saw that—" But she was already dialing. "Oh, yes, I need officers. At Belmont Fine Jewelry immediately," she said into the phone, her voice rising in urgency. "Young black male, gray hoodie. Attempted theft, he's still here, getting aggressive." The last word echoed in Miles's head like a siren. Aggressive? He hadn't even raised his voice. He hadn't taken a step. Customers were backing away, now whispering behind cupped hands. One woman clutched her purse. An older man shook his head in quiet judgment. Miles stood frozen in the center of the store, surrounded by looks that said, "I knew it," without a single word being spoken. Outside, the faint sound of sirens began to grow louder. He wanted to scream, to tell them all they were wrong. That he was just a brother trying to do something good. But no one cared. Linda had already painted the picture. And Miles? He was now just the figure inside it. All he'd done was drop a bracelet. And now the police were on their way. The sirens wailed louder, curling around the corners of Willow Creek's quiet streets until they stopped just outside Belmont Fine Jewelry. Miles stood frozen, heart hammering against his ribs, his breath caught somewhere between fear and disbelief. He hadn't moved, hadn't run, hadn't raised his voice, but none of that mattered. To the people in the store, he was already guilty, because Linda had said so. The glass doors swung open. 2 police officers stepped in. One older, built like a linebacker, his nameplate reading Sergeant Monroe. The other, younger, leaner, eyes scanning the room. Officer Ross. Monroe moved with certainty, his hand already reaching for the cuffs. "That's him," Linda cried, pointing like she'd caught a criminal red-handed. "He tried to steal that bracelet. It's on the floor. I stopped him just in time." Miles tried to speak. "It's not. Sir, put your hands where—" "I can see them," Monroe snapped, already closing the distance. Miles didn't flinch. His hands twitched at his sides, but he didn't raise them. Not yet. His voice stayed steady, even as his chest tightened. "I didn't do anything." Monroe ignored him, reaching for the cuffs. His tone hardened. "Hands up now." And then, with a calmness he didn't even know he had, Miles said 5 words that changed everything. "Call my mother. Right now." Monroe scoffed. "You can. Make your phone call at the station, kid." But Miles didn't budge. Slowly, carefully, he reached into his pocket, no sudden moves, and pulled out his phone. His fingers were steady. His voice didn't crack. He hit one contact and held the phone to his ear. "Mom," he said, "I need you at Belmont. Right now." Less than 10 minutes later, the glass door opened again. Only this time it didn't bring fear. It brought fire. Captain Rochelle Anderson strode into the store like the air itself made way for her. Tall, poised, navy blue suit sharp as a blade. She moved with purpose, heels clicking across the tile like a countdown. In her hand she held up a badge, Chief of Police, Willow Creek, and silence fell across the room. "That's my son," she said, voice low, even, and deadly calm. Every lie turned to her. Sergeant Monroe's hand dropped from the cuffs. Officer Ross stepped back slightly, posture shifting. Linda's mouth fell open. "Wait, you're his mother?" Captain Anderson didn't even look at her. She turned to Monroe, gaze locked. "Did you verify the security footage before preparing to arrest a child?" He stammered. "We responded to a call. The clerk said, you—" "Responded to a bias," she cut in, "not a crime." The weight in her voice silenced the entire store. No yelling, no threats. Just truth, loud and undeniable. "We'll check the footage now," Ross said quickly. His earlier doubt now full-blown awareness, and when they did, it was all there, Miles asking politely. Miles showing his money, the bracelet slipping. No theft, no crime, just a kid buying a gift. Captain Anderson stepped forward, her voice soft now, but sharp as ever. "You were ready to arrest my son," she said, "but the only thing he dropped was a bracelet." The footage spoke louder than any lie ever could. Every second of it played out on the tiny screen behind the counter. Miles entering the store, speaking respectfully, presenting his hard-earned money, and the bracelet slipping from his hand like an accident anyone could have made. No sleight of hand, no suspicious movements, no theft. Just truth, caught on tape. The room had gone dead quiet. Sergeant Monroe stood rigid, jaw tight, arms slack at his sides. Officer Ross let out a breath he'd been holding, visibly relieved that his gut feeling had been right. But Linda Carver, her face went pale. The smirk that had clung to her lips just minutes ago was gone, replaced by something tight and nervous. She looked like a balloon losing air, deflating under the weight of her own lies. Captain Anderson turned to her, eyes razor sharp. "You falsely accused a child," she said evenly, "in a store full of witnesses. And if that video hadn't been there, if I hadn't shown up when I did, what were you hoping would happen next?" Linda opened her mouth, searching for a defense. There was none. The room was still watching, still listening. She shut it again and looked down. Sergeant Monroe cleared his throat, still trying to regain authority. "Chief, I think we're done here." But Rochelle wasn't finished. "No apology?" she asked, eyes now fixed on him. "No acknowledgement that you almost put handcuffs on an innocent child without a single question? Without a second of review?" He didn't respond. She turned to Miles, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Come on, baby," she said softly. "We're leaving." Miles didn't move right away. He looked around, at Monroe, at Ross, at Linda, at the customers who, had watched him get treated like a criminal and said nothing. Then he glanced at the bracelet still lying there on the velvet tray. "I just wanted to buy a gift," he said quietly. "That's all." Then he walked out with his head held high. 3 days later, the story was everywhere. Local news stations ran the footage. Social media exploded with outrage. The words racial profiling, false report, and abuse of authority echoed across every platform. Belmont Fine Jewelry's Yelp page was flooded with one-star reviews. Linda Carver had been placed on indefinite leave, though behind closed doors people said she'd been fired. Captain Anderson held a press conference. She demanded an investigation into the misuse of emergency services and into Sergeant Monroe's conduct. His body cam footage only made things worse for him. The town couldn't ignore it anymore. Back home, Miles sat on the couch, scrolling through the headlines. He should have felt vindicated, proud, but all he could think about was how different things might have gone. If he didn't have a mother with a badge, if there were no cameras, if Officer Ross hadn't hesitated. Then Maya ran into the room. "Jalen, look!" She beamed, showing off the bracelet. His bracelet. The one their mother had quietly bought and placed in a gift box, letting Miles still be the hero. He smiled, holding back emotion. Maybe justice didn't always come with apologies, but sometimes it came with consequences. And this time, he wasn't alone. What would you have done if you were in Miles's shoes or his mother's? Stories like this are not just fiction. For many, they're reality. Moments of misjudgment, silence in the face of injustice, or the courage to stand. And say, "Not this time. We want to hear from you." How did this story make you feel? Did it remind you of something you've experienced or witnessed? Do you believe we're doing enough to challenge stereotypes and hold people accountable for their assumptions? Drop a comment below and let's start a real conversation. One rooted in empathy, truth, and the hope for a better future. Tell us where you're watching from, too. It reminds us how far stories can travel and how deeply they can connect us, even across distance. And if this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think differently, share it. Let someone else feel what you just felt. Together, we can make sure voices like Miles's are not just heard, but remembered.